There is a lot of good everywhere. See the goodness, people. It's amazing. We'll cover this in another session in more detail, but very briefly, there was something in the time of pre-prophethood, in the prophet's life. There was one of the battles, Harb al-Fijar. Some people say Fujar, and it was something that went on for several years, and the prophet partook in this battle. He participated, and he says in a hadith that about Harb al-Fijar that I was handling the arrows with his uncle, and then people disagree. Did he actually fire the arrows, or did he just prepare them? And people say maybe both, but the point is the prophet participated. It was a pre-Islamic battle between Qais Ailan and Kinana. And it's interesting because, when you study these things, you also start to see after effects of it in later history. You see these tribal pasts re-emerging when they start supporting one another again. It's amazing if you see the nuances. But following that, there was something known as Hilf al-Fudul, which was after that, but shortly after that, certain people in Mecca, they made this agreement that we are going to give refuge, safe refuge, and grant asylum to any person who has been oppressed. And any oppressor can have no sanctuary in the haram, in the sacred territory, so which is around the Kaaba and that part of the haram. So this was interesting because this is before Islam. So this is anything between 10 to 15 years before prophethood. And this became known as Hilf al-Fudul. And people disagree. Why was it called Fudul? Some people say because of the Fudul, the virtue in it. Some people say that there were at least 3 people involved in organizing this this agreement, because it became a pact. And several neighboring tribes kind of pledged their allegiance to it. And they say because several people were named Fudul, it got the name Fudul. The Fudul is the plural of Fudul, but whatever it was known as Hilful, the Pact of Fudul. And the Prophet says later, many years later, decades later, the Prophet said that he said, I was invited, because this took place in somebody's home known as Ibn Jad'an, and we'll speak about him as well in the future. He's a very, like an illustrious personality and character that appears pre-Islam. And even today, people, if you hear of people that are referred to Jad'an tribe, it's actually a sub-element of Quraysh coming down, but it's with reference to Ibn Jad'an, who was incredibly virtuous, and in pre-Islam he used to be very generous, but then he does have issues, and we'll speak about that another time. But at his home they have this meeting, and the Prophet says decades later, he says, I was invited to Hilf al-Fudul, and I partook in it, in this pact, to help the vulnerable. And he says, وَلَوْ دُعِيتُ إِلَى مِثْلِهِ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ لَعَجَبْتُ. Says, and if anybody had invited me to the same kind of thing in Islam, I would definitely hasten to it. I would agree to it. I would respond to them. I would go meet them. See, what's interesting is the Prophet was not saying that this can only come from Islam. Other people, non-Muslims, could come up with things. And the Prophet was saying, Lo du'itu ila mithlihi fil Islam. I'm invited to it whilst in Islam. I would hasten to it because it was goodness. And I think these are the things that these nuances we sometimes forget, that there's goodness everywhere. Don't think that goodness is in these values, in these principles. It is not constricted to, just as I said in today's lesson at the beginning, that people try to constrict God with words. goodness. You can't constrict it with words. So yeah, wherever we see goodness, we should take it. Wherever we see wisdom, we should embrace it. That's my message.